All right, here we go. Goodness, we're almost here. Playoffs are almost upon us. Welcome in, everybody. It's another great Wednesday in the middle of October. We're getting near the end of the month. Hopefully, your yard work's getting done. You're getting those final preps in for the winter. It's cold. I'll have to admit, for the first time ever in the summer, fall-esque months, I turned my heater on, which is, I feel like a milestone in this area. But it is getting chillier. Leaves are starting to turn colors, starting to fall, which is good news because it means it's almost time for playoffs. Welcome in, everybody, to the Gem City Sports Podcast, brought to you by our friends at Repich Investments. They keep financial guidance simple. If you want more info, go to the website, www.repichinvestments.com, or you can simply call their phone number during normal business hours at 814-734-3433, 814-734-3433. Repich Investments, keeping financial guidance simple. It is tonight our high school football bracket prediction show. Bring in Rob Batts, who has been basically doing more than helping us out. He's the reason why this show on Wednesdays and Fridays have run so well, and excited to have him back, Rob, for what is something different we thought we would do today. Week 10, there are games that, as of this moment, are still getting canceled, not being played, and we expected that. So tonight, we're going to go ahead and do a little bracket prediction show. We're going to talk the 3A bracket, try to work our way through that, get through 2A, and then talk a little bit about 4 and 6A as well. So, Rob, first and foremost, it's great to have you on. I know it's hard to believe we're already almost at this point, but playoffs indeed are here.
No, it's crazy, and I turned on my heater as well. Actually, I cranked it up a digit from 70 to 71. Because up on the second floor, it's not getting up there too well. But no, really excited to finish up the season with a great game between Mercyhurst and Fort LaBeouf. On paper, it looks tremendous.
Yeah, take me through that game, if you would, and just really quickly what you think. Obviously, a crazy game last week with Mercyhurst Prep Eisenhower, but that's probably the headline game of the weekend, given that they're both looking to play well going into postseason.
Yeah, and I had the pleasure, Coach Blos reached out and invited me out. So I was able to go out to speak to the kids, for my son's Dylan Matz Foundation. I went out there Monday, and I'll tell you what, it was really good to see them, outside of their pads and in the weight room. And I got to tell you, Isaac, I've been really touting that junior class. And as I was talking to the kids, they have 3 of their linemen walked in they go to the tech school, I guess, in the afternoon for half a day or whatever it is. So they came in a little bit later because they were on the bus. I mean, that junior class deserves to be touted up because they have some monster linemen. And I mean, they're a good looking group out there. And the other thing that really impressed me about them, as you speak to them, and, I'm a big undiagnosed ADHD guy because I'm always all over the place, but I was just really impressed with how they were focused and just their interaction as well. So excited to see get a chance to meet them and see them. And we've been covering Mercyhurst now for quite a long time, and
Yeah,
it really is a big game for both teams, really, because LaBeouf wants to go in hot next week. Mercyhurst, I think they didn't expect what they got from Eisenhower last week.
right.
And they're another team. They had that letdown last year, so they want to go in hot because as we get through the brackets, they're going to have a familiar opponent.
No doubt. It'll be a good game. It'll be the headliner of Week 10. There are fewer and fewer games being played, including another game that we thought would be neat to see with GM Hickory that's obviously not being played either. So games not happening. So that gives us a little bit of time to go into some bracket predictions. And, of course, those brackets will be coming out the weekend following this upcoming weekend, I guess I should say, on Saturday, Sunday, depending on how long the committee deliberates and decides. So let's dive in here, Rob. Let's start in 3A. And that, of course, has been the bracket that we've been really touting all year long, and I think we expected would be, I don't want to say the most controversial at the top, but maybe the most questioning of where the seeds get lined up. Going to try to bring up a little bracket here so we can fill this in. We assume, Rob, first and foremost, that this is going to be an 8-team bracket, correct? I don't foresee this being any less. They're not going to take any more. Eight's the number, right?
8's the number, and there's 8 deserving teams without a doubt.
So let's start at the top. I think we can probably all agree that Hickory is probably going to be the top team. Obviously, the head-to-head win against Sharon in a crazy region. They didn't lose a game, 8-1 so far in the season. That's where they're going to end up. And I think for the Hornets, I've been saying this with them and Sharon. I don't even think they've looked as all impressive as maybe they would like to believe. But that for me is a scary thing coming into the tournament, and the fact that they're not playing their best football necessarily, and yet they're still going to be the teams to obviously beat.
100%. Christian Dungy is about as impressive a quarterback as there is. And when I'm talking dual threat quarterback,
yeah.
And they knocked off Farrell. It was early in the year, but they knocked off Farrell. And I mean, they're region champs, and they're sitting idle this week. So yeah, they definitely deserve to be there.
So we have Hickory and Sharon as the top two seeds that would go on the bottom of the bracket. And I think this is kind of what we expected at the beginning of the year. Everyone expected that in some order, right? Whoever won the head-to-head was probably going to be the number one seed. I think Sharon, for me, is the team that I'd be a little bit more worried about, just because they didn't necessarily have the year they were hoping for in terms of their record. I know they played a really tough schedule, but we saw that offense in week one, Rob, against Mercyhurst Prep, and it was without Bishop Root. And we looked and we thought, man, Ethan Engelmore, really all he has to do is distribute the football, and they're going to be a team that's going to be almost unbeatable. But it seems to me now that even with Root back, and again, this is someone who's watching from afar, it doesn't seem like they are a whole yet. And maybe that's just my assessment from what I saw with week one compared to now. But I think they feel like they can probably go another level in the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, and they're going to have to go another level. If they want to get out of District 10 and win this thing. But we forget about Lampkin too, and I don't know if he's back healthy, but he was another one, and I mean his numbers actually were better than Engelmore. Now Engelmore's been playing a lot more as of late, but
right.
We saw Terry and White. I mean, he's a burner right there in the backfield, and then like you said, Bishop Root, and they're just a good fundamentally sound team, all in all. But they're going to have their work cut out for them. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And we got to remember, and I mean, I know that any of these teams can knock each other off, but I mean, Farrell really took it to them. I think they slapped them like 30-0, midway through the season.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, the other part of this equation becomes just like you mentioned, the health. And I don't think Sharon's ever been 100% healthy with Gafir Lampkins having some trouble. Of course, Bishop Root, is he still 100%, even though he's been back for 7-8 weeks now? So we'll see. Those are likely the top two seeds. I don't think there's any surprise there. And then we get to the conversation about number three. And you and I have been texting back and forth about this, and I think we're in agreement, but I want to preface this before we get into why we're picking this team for the third seed. Is this, in the last few years, this spot has been the burning question as to who you play, who you pick. And traditionally, the committee has gone with whoever is the best performing Mercer County team, not named Sharon or Hickory. Really, since 2021, that's how it's been. And you and I were on this podcast last week, and we said, all right, it's probably going to be Grove City as the number 3 seed. That's more than likely. But you and I, maybe we're going out on a limb. Maybe the committee's going to go the way of Grove City. But you and I are taking another team, Rob, for the number 3 seed based on our bracket prediction here.
Yeah, and I think that they have to when you look at it. I mean, they're undefeated in the region. They played a tough schedule. They had that loss to Farrell. But, they beat a Meadville team that is way better than their record, who has also played a really tough schedule. Mm-hmm. And again, that's Fort LaBeouf. And they're playing well, and they've really, we talk about injuries and bumps along the road here. The last couple of weeks, they've been really through it, and they just keep turning things out. I don't see how they can go, and they're going to finish with a better record. As well, even regardless what happens, because Grove City is going to sit idle. So LaBeouf's going to have another win on top of them, and possibly 2 wins on top of them. And Grove City was knocked off by Northeast. We can play that who played who game and back and forth. But, Grove City, they squeaked by LaBeouf. They caught him at the right time. And, LaBeouf has pretty much handled everybody else as far as Northeast.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I've always been of the belief that head to head should only come into play when your record's equal,
Right.
or when one team has played an undoubtedly more difficult schedule than the other. And I think even though Hickory, Sharon are on Grove City's schedule, I don't think you can make that legitimate of an argument that the schedule for Grove City has been as difficult or more difficult substantially than Fort LaBeouf. And I think too the Northeast win comes into play because that, to me, it eliminates the whole head to head thing, because then we'll say, all right, well, we lost to Grove City, but Fort Grove City lost week 1 to Northeast, and we steamrolled them with a big second half.
Right.
I think also winning your region has to mean something. I know that this has been the argument in the past with a lot of people that, all right, well, Mercer County traditionally has always won, and so they just get the benefit of the doubt. I've never believed that. I understand that history has some component in terms of weighing in people's minds, but you have to look at things year to year. And I feel even with the head-to-head loss that LaBeouf is, in my view, the better team. And I think to your points that you made, Rob, and the points that I'm making now, I think there's a good agreeable component. So we have LaBeouf at number 3, and I think, Rob, that probably puts Grove City at 4, although I will say I don't think the degree of separation between Grove City and Corey is that much.
Yeah. Again, now let's look at, who played who. And I think the Grove City definitely has had a tougher schedule there.
For sure.
And, like we talked about, if you're going to get Grove City, you kind of have to get them early. They had a couple tough weeks in a row, with Hickory and Sharon. And I believe Conneaut played them well, tough as well. But yeah, I think you have to definitely give the nod to Grove City.
So our first matchup, based on our predictions, is Grove City and Corey in the 4-5. We had penciled this in as Fort LaBeouf Corey for the last couple of weeks, and we're making a change here. What a matchup that's going to be. It would be fascinating for me here, Rob, because I look at the way that Grove City's played. We've seen Corey more than we've seen Grove City, but when Grove City has won their games, it has not been because they're just bludgeoning teams on offense. I think they have a pretty stout defense, one that was much better than when they played Northeast in week 1. And Corey's a squad that just scores a bunch of points. I mean, you and I, at least me, I've been very surprised at how Jeff Goodwill has been able to be consistent with that team, especially after you lose Carey and Lesher from a year ago. You get that receiving core for Cena is a big part of it. There are others as well that have really played a big part. But I'm fascinated in this matchup specifically to see, is this Corey offense able to pick through the Grove City defense? And if so, what that's going to look like.
Yeah, and I think in Jeff Goodwill, when we've talked to him before, he's alluded to it. They're going to have to be able to run the ball. They can't get into that game like they got into against Northeast, where they have negative rushing yards or anything like that. So, excuse me. So they're going to have to really be able to run the ball as well. And then again, we're coming in playoff time, so who knows what the weather is going to bring. Those are the kind of the scary things right there. When you look at Corey. But they've shown they can play with anybody this year.
And it'll be a fun matchup to watch. If it is Grove City and Corey, Grove City will be a host team, whether they're the 3 or the 4. But let's just say it is Grove City and Corey. That game, of course, is going to be closer to Grove City. You would imagine it's probably going to be at a Farrell or a Sharon. That could also be a Slippery Rock University or a Slippery Rock High School candidate, I think, potentially. But I don't want to get into the weeds of picking where the locations are. Right. That's out of my purview. Let's talk 6, 7, 8 here, Rob. There's been a bit of I don't want to say a shakeup, but I think 6 is probably easy to look at. And for me, and we've been talking about this, I think Northeast is probably 6 and a very deserving 6. I mean, they've played really well this year. I mean, you've talked about Chris Krahowski and how well he's had that team, and the fact that they end the season at 7-2, potentially going to sit there at the end of the year at 8-2, assuming this Warren game doesn't get canceled at the last minute. They got a lot of things to be excited about, and I think you could make the argument that if they play the same way in the first half as they did in the second half against Fort LaBeouf, that game's very, very close.
It is, and you look at Galloway and Crozier and Ringer. I mean, they have weapons. They're physical. Just like we talked about, we thought it'd be really great if they were able to get Grove City, since they beat Grove City. Psychologically, it's probably better now for LaBeouf, because LaBeouf really took it to him that second half. and they're both really physical teams. So it's going to be it's going to be interesting. But the difference with, in my mind, just sitting here and even watching last week with Fort LaBeouf, everybody wants to say that, well, Fort LaBeouf just wants to run, but they can throw the ball, and they put the ball in the air really well last week, and they've done it at times this season. Dominic Walters is a true dual threat quarterback. So, how's Chris Grohowski going to defend them? Is he going to load that box up like he's been doing all season long, or what, and risk those big plays? It's going to be interesting, but I really feel for Northeast to beat LaBeouf, they're going to have to play nearly perfect. And I'm going to say to the fact where the big three from Northeast is going to have a really big night. And I think I don't see that game being low scoring, but who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it would be a fascinating second time around. We'll see. Does Northeast come out? Do they play more aggressively, as aggressively as they can in the first half? Because I think they feel in their hearts they can win that game. And I also think, too, it would be, the atmosphere at that game would be unbelievable. I mean, we talk a lot about Region 5 and having an Erie County matchup in the first round of the playoff. And most of the time we get at least one. And I think Fort LaBeouf Corey would be a great matchup, no doubt. But I think in terms of proximity, you put that game at Seneca High School, you put it at General McLean, and you have boatloads of people come and attend that game. That would be a crazy atmosphere, crazy environment. So there you go. We have Fort LaBeouf Northeast as our first round predicted matchup. Corey Grove City in the 4-5 on the flip side of the bracket. Let's fill in the last two teams here, Rob, that are going to face Sharon and Hickory in our minds. It's going to probably be the likes of Girard Conneaut. The only question is what seeds are they? And I'll leave the floor to you to give what we determine those seedings are going to be.
And it's going to be tough. And the only reason why I lean towards Conneaut is the fact that this game's down at Cache. It's a tough place to play. And Girard is really, they've had a tough go at it, with their schedule, but I'm not going to count them out. It's like a flip a coin game. I mean, honestly, when you look at who they've played and things like that, it's a really tough one to call. And, Girard, I watched a lot of film, and I tell you, I love Aiden Arnold, the way he runs the ball, and Ryan St. Julian just really commands things well. And Mason Kalicki on both sides of the ball, like, that's a grown man at linebacker. He's all over the place. And, he's just a load inside. So yeah, that's a flip a coin game right there. But, it's an important game because, again, who would you rather face, Hickory or Sharon? I mean, I'll be honest with you, the way that Hickory, their only loss is to Canfield, Ohio, who's a really good program over there. I mean, you think you might want to play that Sharon team instead of Hickory. So, there's a lot to play for in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. I think you probably have to go, in my opinion. And the only reason I say this is because D10, as much as they can, doesn't necessarily want to feature rematches in the first round. They're going to have to with the 4-5-3-6, but I think you probably slot Conneaut into the 7 because they played Hickory earlier this year. Girard becomes the 8, but I don't think like you said, it's not that big of a difference. So, right. And like you mentioned with Conneaut, Conneaut and Girard are two sneaky good teams. This is not an 8-team field that features two bad teams. These are no slouches with 7 and 8. And again, you never know. Hickory Sharon would be the overwhelming favorite in those games, but you catch them on a bad day, you get into the second half, you're within a touchdown. You never know. It's postseason. Things happen. Crazier things have happened. So there's our bracket, Rob, from 3A based on our predictions. It's not the official one. It'll probably look a little bit different, but we've got Hickory, Girard, Corey facing Grove City. LaBeouf gets the nod at 3 against Northeast, and Conneaut and Sharon in the 2-7. It'll make for a fun first round, no doubt.
It'll be fun, and see how close we are.
I'm excited. It'll be a great thing. So there's our 3A bracket prediction here on our Gym City Sports Podcast Network, our flagship show tonight, coming to you live on a Wednesday evening. Let's transition a bit here, Rob, and talk the 2A bracket. And okay. There was a lot of question marks, I think, coming into last week about how Eisenhower would face against Mercyhurst Prep. Of course, some news coming out about the Eisenhower football team and that might impact their record. But your assessment of what you think the field in 2A is going to look like, and B, how it could go down, because we anticipate there's 4 teams. Would they take less? I don't know. I'm just curious to get your thoughts.
I don't think they can take less. And Farrell, head and shoulders above everybody. And I'll tell you, if Farrell knocks off Prep this week, I mean, it just really tells how good they are. I mean,
Yeah.
Prep's played a tough schedule, and it's a bigger school. We got to remember Farrell's really a 1A school. They're playing up. So, definitely Farrell number one. You have Pegues, and Jules Johnson is one of the better backs, in this area. And you hope down the road for a matchup with him and Vinny Feliciano again, but we'll see.
So based on our prediction here, Rob, and I think this is probably how it will come out. Farrell Eisenhower in the 1-4. You get the rematch with Mercier's Prep and Seneca, albeit It is a rematch that will include Vinny Feliciano this time, who did not play the last time they played because he was suspended. And so I think we all probably look at this bracket and think it's Farrell, Mercyhurst, Prep. And I don't want to think too far ahead, but you look at the Lakers. This game against Fort LaBeouf is going to be a big one, more so for Seneca Prep, because LaBeouf is a team that's similar to what the Bobcats, I think, like to do in scheme in a way. Take me through the avenue of what Mercyhurst Prep needs to do to have an opportunity to win this bracket. Not necessarily that guarantees it, because Farrell, like you said, is a powerhouse, but besides the obvious of Vinny going wild, what's the avenue for the Lakers to find their way through 2A?
Well, one, they can't. If they do play Seneca, which it looks like that, they can't overlook them, because Seneca did not have Rylan Harwood. I think he played maybe a total of maybe 10 plays. He was hurt. Zach Moats had been injured. He really tried to go as much as he could. They ended up, I don't remember how many injuries and illnesses that they had, but they started 3 freshmen on the offensive line that game. And it was nip and tuck, and again, Vinny wasn't there, and Ian Elman Sparks wasn't there as well. But, they were both really undermanned, and probably Seneca was undermanned a little bit more. Seneca finds a way to hang in there, and, just like they did against Eisenhower, and that was at Eisenhower. So it's going to be tough. And, Mercyhurst, we saw what happened last year. So they have to go into that game and not overlook them at all, and not look to the next round. Because if they do, they could be beaten. And that would be a big problem, because we know Jack Corey's going to have those kids ready to play. And, they're getting healthy. And Rylan Harwood and Zach Moats, they're as good as they come.
Well, I think you have to just look back to last year. If you want any motivation for Jeff Root's squad, right? You were in what you thought was a good position to beat Sharpsville. You had momentum for the majority of the game. You were up multiple scores, and they came back in the fourth quarter, and your season ends up ending. And so I think if you're Jeff Root, you have to let these kids know, many of whom were on the team from last year, that look, this can't happen. Like we can't be in this situation again. We're better than that. We are certainly this year, when they've been firing on all cylinders, they're scary. And I just think ultimately, if you're the Lakers, you have to understand that this is, at minimum, you got to get to the D10 championship game. This team is too good to not be. But Seneca will be feisty. As you mentioned, Jack Corey's an amazing coach.
They will be. And you brought it up about Mercyhurst, and you've seen it. When you look at their roster and the depth that they have for a 2A school, they're loaded. It's just them putting everything together, not getting the penalties, finishing games and things like that. But, rarely do we see a line that matches up well with them. I mean, I think this week you're going to see a LaBeouf line that matches up well with them. Maybe not as heavy, but size-wise, they have some big kids. But Mercyhurst, they just need to really establish things. They need to figure something out in the passing game as well. They struggled again last week. There was a play that was called a penalty that I know a lot of people felt that it should have been on Eisenhower instead, but there was 2 big penalties both ways, so it evened out if we want to look at it like that. But Mercyhurst has to, if they're able to get by Seneca and they play Farrell, they're going to have to control the clock, and they're going to have to chunk up tough yards and not make mistakes with penalties, and just limit Farrell's opportunities with the ball. And that's, I think
truthfully, I agree. I think truthfully that the key player in that game is not Vinny. If it ends up happening, it's Tyler Quinn. You're going to have to get him the ball and have him go 3-4 yards a carry as he's done downhill in the backfield to the sidecar or Cotterill, and just let him plow straight forward 4 or 5 yards a carry if you can. Do your best to get, like you said, get first down, 6-7 minute drives, and then that opens up at some point Vinny to make a big play. So we're looking ahead, but that's what we think will be in the 2A bracket and what's likely going to be a 4-team bracket, and that's pretty much the only way you can go with those 4 teams. You could, you're not going to. I mean, the only argument, do you flip Eisenhower Seneca, but they won't do that, and they shouldn't do that. Right. All right, let's talk a bit. We're not going to get to 1A right now because that just in terms of timing's sake, but let's talk a bit about 4A and maybe a hybrid conversation here, Rob, as we continue along here in the Gem City Sports Podcast. This is our high school football bracket prediction and preview show ahead of the bracket reveal coming up this weekend. Rob, I think it's no doubt GM's going to be the overwhelming favorite. There are probably only 3 teams they take. If they take 3 teams in this tournament, Meadville, Oil City likely going to play each other with the Lancers getting some rest. Let's start by looking at that prospective Meadville-Oil City game. It was a game that I think was a lot closer than what people maybe anticipated. Last time, Oil City ended up coming away in that game. But how do you view these 2 teams, the challengers to GM? One of them, of course, will be in that District 10 championship game, assuming they take 3 teams.
Well, I mean, their first matchup was very close. Meadville came back, and I thought Meadville was going to pull it out, and then Oil City, won at the end. It's really interesting because Oil City and Corey, Oil City decided not to play. Corey went along with it, so they're both sitting idle. So Oil City's going to have more time to heal, more time to prepare for Meadville if that's who they get right off the bat. Provided Meadville's in, but I can't see them not being in with a schedule that they played, not accepting it. And then Meadville in turn has to play Erie. Now they are down in Meadville, and Erie has not been playing well, but again, we know how much talent Erie has, so that's tough. So Meadville, you want to come out of that game and you want to be rolling. You want to have a lot of self-confidence because Oil City turned around and beat Erie in an unbelievable game. But that those 2, that's a matter of a few points here or there, and Meadville definitely has the speed, but as we saw with Oil City, Coach York is going to line up in the eye. He's going to run power. He's going to run ISO. And, they're happy with getting 5, 6, 7 yards and controlling the clock and playing defense.
That's in all likelihood the semifinal game. And then, of course, GM awaits the winner. They've already beaten both teams pretty soundly earlier this season. And as we mentioned Friday, a program statement win over Cathedral Prep in what was a homecoming of sorts for a lot of Lancer alumni and fans as they double up the Ramblers 28-14. You don't want to look too far ahead, and I think it's a disservice to Meadville Oil City, who will have an uphill climb, whichever one wins to play GM. But you look ahead for this Lancer team, and between the D10 championship game, the potential for being in the state playoffs. What did this win on Friday against Cathedral Prep do in your mind, Rob, if anything, about the potential for them advancing even maybe further than they were last year if they're able to get through District 10?
Well, one, psychological momentum going forward, especially if Prep comes down into 4A. Again, we talked about it. It's been a huge rivalry. It'll continue to be a huge rivalry, but that's a big win. Prep has played a brutal schedule, and a lot of people thought that Prep was going to pull that game out. But GM, they just continue rolling right along. And, I look at that loss. I feel like, when we talk about catching teams early, I've watched a lot of DuBois this past week, and I feel like DuBois just caught GM early. Or I feel like if they played today, I think it'd be a completely different
like Newcastle game. Last year at the beginning of the year in week 1.
Correct. I really do. And you talk about not looking ahead. I can't help to not look ahead, with GM, because is it going to be Clearfield? Is it going to be a Punxsutawney team that beat DuBois twice this year? And is rolling along pretty well. Or is it going to be if Obama University Prep / Obama is out of District 8, who they just beat Westinghouse. So it's going to be tough. The good thing about it is it's going to be up here, and that'll be just huge, because that was a big task last year to be able to go down, and play a Clearfield team at that point that, I mean, they were unbelievable.
Yeah, they were tough, and they did a lot of the things that GM saw in District 10. They just did it 100 times better in running the football. Of course, that what you would consider all American in the high school level running back, and just that crowd there was pretty great too. And GM is going to be fortunate if they get through D10 about having another home game. They've only had 3 home games this year, so they would love to, I'm sure, be able to pack the stands there. And I think for Marshall McCormick, we've been talking about this all year, but this team, I think, as a whole, more talented than what last year's team was. And I think it's a service, the fact they don't necessarily rely on one specific individual. The tight ends are big game changers. It'll be in the case of the district tournament. It'll be a case if they get there in states. And Matt Caro, this is the other thing I think that was really illuminated in the prep game on Friday, is they don't make a lot of mistakes. And that's something that last year they were prone to do at times, right? When you lob it up to Jacob Zeitz, or when you feel like you have to take shots down the field, you're prone to throwing picks, you're prone to turning the ball over. And it wasn't a huge problem, but it was an issue at times for GM last year. They're just not doing that this season, and they're taking the ball away. And I think the thing, too, that you have to keep in mind is when you don't turn the ball over and you force teams to put the ball in the air, it just makes it that much more difficult. So it'll be fascinating to see how GM comes out in postseason, Rob.
Yeah, and like I said, it's hard not to look ahead. And my hope is they get through things, they win that first round, and then get a WPIAL opponent, and it would be great. But when you talk about them, how can you not like everything about them? Especially when you look at Matt Caro. Matt Caro's numbers they're just ridiculous, and he doesn't make mistakes. For as much as they throw the ball, to only have 2 interceptions on the year. Again, those two tight ends. I think if you looked at them and said, okay, what is one thing that concerns you about them? The only thing in my mind is if they have to get into a situation where they have to be able to run the ball, are they going to be able to do it against a really good opponent? And that's what I want to see. But I mean, offensively, they're unbelievable. Defensively, Wayne's got them playing incredible as well. So I think they're just one of our best shots to go far.
And I'm sure, of course, they're not playing this weekend against Hickory, but I'm sure that Marshall will find a team to scrimmage against. You don't want to go 3 weeks without playing. You fall into the trap that prep sometimes have fallen into the last few years, where you go a few weeks without playing a football game and you look rusty in the first half sometimes. So we'll see. GM is going to be the favorite in 4A. Meadville Oil City likely to be the teams that play in that semifinal. And let's finish, Rob, by talking 6A title. A few weeks back when McDowell and Erie played, I think me more than you, I looked at that game and I thought, all right, well, Paul Johnson is the difference maker. This is an Erie team that nearly beat Prep again in week 1. It was really a botched extra point from winning week 1. And does that change the trajectory of the season? We don't know. But when you look at this game and the way McDowell was able to take out Erie in pretty significant fashion the first time around, what's your take on this? And is it just for you boils down to McDowell is just going to do the same thing again? I'm curious to get your take.
Well, I said it last week. McDowell is so much better than their record. When you take teams in District 10, we could take 4 teams, and McDowell is right there as far as the best teams in District 10. Let's throw out their record. I mean, you look at things. They lost to a Highlands team that's undefeated. They lost to a Mentor team that's undefeated, a Fitch team that's 7-1, a Steubenville team at Steubenville that's 6-2, and now they have to finish up against St. Francis. I mean, they have run the gauntlet, no doubt. And they expected to have a different quarterback this year. I mean, they've had to make a lot of adjustments on the fly. And then you flip things. As long as they're competitive, they come out of this game against St. Francis, relatively healthy. But then, you flip things to the Erie side. I've watched Erie the last few weeks, and I just watched the game was televised on YouTube of their last opponent. And I really felt like Erie had a chance to go in and win the Oil City game. And I felt like they had a chance to win last week. And they were close in the first half, and then they just were just dismantled, and they relied so much on Paul Johnson. And Aaron Slocum's going to do everything that he can do to take that away. So when you look at that game, Erie has to be one, healthy. Everybody needs to be there. Paul Johnson has to play a perfect game because they ride him so much, but I'd really like to see them. I'd like to see them use their running backs more and, attack the edges and outside, because they've got three unbelievable running backs. But they just did not look good last game. And that's why I think this game against Meadville is so important. You're going down to Meadville. It's going to be a raucous crowd. You know how they pack it in there at Bender Field, and you don't want to go into that McDowell game by losing to another 4A opponent like they lost to Oil City. If you do that, you're really deflated. So they've got to go in and they've got to take care of business, and they really need a dominant victory.
And I think they also need to maybe even find that identity, that second gear that you just kind of alluded to, right? Using your backs, getting outside the hash marks. And I think maybe using the spread to your advantage as opposed to it taking advantage of you. You and I have had a lot of conversations. And of course, your time coaching is a lot of teams now are going to the spread, and that's great. But there are teams that go into the spread and it can be effective, but it's more of a one every 5 plays is effective. And there are teams that use the spread and are explosive every play. And so I think for Erie, it's in this game on Friday against Meadville, it's can you unlock that second level of the success with the spread that you can take into the McDowell game. And I think too, like, I know that the year has not gone the way they've wanted to, but to play devil's advocate, I think McDowell is the favorite in the game, no question. But this is an Erie team that was a couple bad turnovers away from beating McDowell last year. It's a similar roster for them. Everyone's a year older now. McDowell, even with the schedule they've played, is still relatively young. And again, I think Erie, at some point, are they due for a good game? I would like to think. I just wonder if it's going to be against McDowell. And I think the psychological part of this too, Rob, in the fact that they have been not the McDowell this year, but they've been so close to beating these other big teams, and they just haven't got over the hump. At some point, they're going to have to win one of these. You wonder if it's the championship game. But I agree with you. I think McDowell's probably a favorite going in.
Yeah, and look at Erie. I mean, now Hickory was without their best 2 players when they had those injuries happen. But I mean, Erie was right there with Hickory. They were right there with Prep week 1. I mean, they show they can do it. It's just they have to just put everything together and go all in. And like I said, I feel like this week for psychological purposes is really, really important to get out of that Meadville game with a win and to go in with some serious momentum.
So, Rob, before we let you go and before we end this show here, this, of course, is our bracket prediction and preview show. Let's just say in a perfect world that our brackets are all accurate and 3A is what they end up going with. Across all brackets, take me through the one matchup you'd be most looking forward to see in the first round of postseason.
Boy, I mean, I love seeing that rematch, but I mean, I think in 3A that Corey Grove City game, is really exciting. But again, I love to see that rematch with LaBeouf and Northeast. But how can you not be excited for Seneca Mercyhurst?
Yeah.
I mean, we know like there's between the programs, there's no love lost there. And neither team had a full roster the first time that they played. And I mean, there's been some tight games, with the 2 of them. And so, I mean, that's going to be really exciting. But again, I mean, if you're going to talk up here, like you said, I mean, Fort LaBeouf, Northeast, that could be as exciting as you could get wherever that's at. You think it's going to be a packed house and just an incredible atmosphere.
And I think the other one too, that we maybe overlooked because of the team they're going to have to play in the final, but I think Meadville Oil City round 2 could be a lot of fun. I think it could be a lot of fireworks. And you mentioned these 2 teams, they can throw the ball a bunch now. They like to do that. We saw Meadville last year getting the spread. I really don't think the only first round matchup that I don't think is going to have any amount of intrigue in terms of on paper is probably one of the ones in 1A. You could maybe make the argument that, I mean, Hickory could get up on Girard quick, but I mean, they all have a layer of excitement too.
They do.
I don't think we don't get that most years, and one way or another, that this is going to be a bracket that's similar to what we predicted, and so I think we could have some good ones in week one of postseason. We don't always get that, Rob.
No, and I'm excited. I look at all these matchups. I could sit there and watch any one of them and be excited and go through every scenario, how things are going to turn out. But, hats off to all the, Northeast and Gerard and then Cash. The program was so down, and, everybody getting back in there and turning it around. And, like I said, I got to see that Eisenhower team. That's a good team right there. That Jacobzak, he's a really good player. And, it's going to be really interesting. They have to finish up against Greenville this week, and Greenville's now down in 1A with Wilmington. And, that's kind of going to be interesting to see, how good are those 1A teams in Wilmington and Greenville. And I think they're pretty good.
And to your point, some of the teams you just mentioned, I think the trend that we're seeing in Erie County now specifically is if you find a coach that has what it takes, I think, to usher in the new age of high school football, you start getting success, you become a powerhouse right away, right? Jeff Goodwill and Corey, they've started to move their way up the ranks. They're now a team that's going to win 7-8 games a year. Seneca with Jack Corey is always going to be in the top couple of seeds, if not worst at 3rd and 2A. Marshall McCormick and GM, we know what that program has done. So you're the Northeast of the world, Gerard, depending on how long Mark Brooks is around the program, and other teams as well. Like, there's a lot to be excited about, I think. And regardless of what happens in the first round of the playoffs, you get in, you get that experience, and then you start making waves, Rob, and before you know it, you're a perennial contender.
Absolutely. And it's just the process, one game at a time, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. I do hope that District 10 does make a change in the next cycle and does something so we don't have all these teams sitting idle. I hope they make them region games so it can really count that last week of the season.
It'd be nice. And I think teams want that too. The last thing you want is a week off before playoffs. And I know some teams want to get healthy, but I think you need to be playing is what I'm getting at. And who knows? Maybe you just decide to start the playoffs. You want to try to start the playoffs even earlier. Maybe you start the season a week later. I don't know. I know there are rules and regulations around that, but to be able to have that opportunity to make week 10 meaningful and make it so that we can talk about week 10 and not doing our bracket predictions after week 9 would be a lot of fun,
right? Absolutely, 100%.
All right, well, that's going to do it for our high school football bracket preview prediction show. Drop a like in the comments. Leave a comment as well. Let us know how you like the show and what your bracket predictions are for high school. We'll know them by the end of the weekend. Have yourself a wonderful rest of the week. We're taking Friday off because we don't have many games for high school football rapid reaction, but we're back on Monday to talk NFL, more high school stuff, and then we get ready for postseason, and we'll see where Rob and I are going to be in terms of calling games maybe as well at the end of the month. Take care.